I wouldn't be into any of this if it wasn't for Christcore. 10 years ago, 10 years. I mean, I will say I still believe in God, not nearly as much as I used to be. But when I was, I realized that my taste in music, which went from like 80s bands and classic rock to grunge, I started realizing that everything I was listening to kept getting heavier and heavier. So I decided some December night in 2015, does Christian metal exist? And I just found Impending Doom, For Today, and a bunch of like heavy metal.
For Today, man.
Yeah, dude. So I found a bunch of these bands, and that even to this day, whether it be records like For Today's Ecclesia, or all the older Impending Doom records, a lot of those records shaped what I love about deathcore or just heavy music as a whole. Like whether it be just like 16-bar China breakdowns, which we definitely pulled a lot of that in this record, especially in the new song. You know, the typical deathcore blast beat. It's like probably my favorite thing ever to play on a drum kit. Yeah, dude, I'm forever indebted to Christcore. I still visit those records every once in a while just for pure nostalgia, even in the midst of its decline, more or less, because bands are becoming more accessible, either dropping the Christian label, making still quality music.
Right.
It's an amazing thing I still hold on to a lot.
That's a good point with the breakdowns too. You know what I mean? Like the long, just China cool patterns. Like For Today was good with that. Like just letting the breakdown. And we were talking about interesting patterns. For Today would do these. You know, I remember like We're Not Fearless. Like those are my favorite because I love deathcore, but I've noticed over the years that I'm more of a metalcore breakdown dude. Like it's like August Burns Reds are incredible with those breakdowns.
Messengers is my favorite metalcore record of all time. I get it. Dude.
It's just like because I want to be like that, you know, and in deathcore very often is more of a vocal fest. Like it's more like just like it's cool, but like I love with a 6-pounder, you're just like mushing breakdown to me is that, you know,
that's
and
where it's at.
Christcore was, you know, for that was just perfect for that.
Going back to earlier when you guys said we're talking about like influences, I'm not really like a deathcore guy. I didn't really get into deathcore until like the last couple of years because of Heavy Hitter. I'm a Christcore guy. Like I'm the Christian who's like, I couldn't go to a show unless it was a Christian band. Like, you know, For Today was my first show. Devil Wears Prada.
Hell yeah.
I like that's all I listen to. I still listen to it today because it's such good music.
They were writing better riffs than some of the secular bands. What?
That's what I'm saying, bro. Are you kidding me? Like the dude's sweeping for like 2 minutes straight. But my point is that like all my influence comes from like Gideon, old school Gideon, O Sleeper, Impending Doom, you know, Cultist, 1,000 Times Repent, just all these
hell yeah,
insane bands.
Yeah, and you might have noticed there is Plague from the Devil Wears Prada on my wall. You don't see it.
Yes,
the Plague.
Yes.
This was my entry in the metalcore world. Prior to that, it was more like Slipknot, Linkin Park, these kinds of things. I think we all kind of had this similar kind of entry. But when I heard, I'm always going to remember talking about Christcore, the Cornerstone 2006, the Devil Wears Prada infamous video that the keyboardist looks like he's going to like kill someone. I don't know what he's doing. He's just like throwing himself everywhere. Like he's mushing on his keyboard, basically. We need to bring that back, by the way. But it was so sick and crazy. And I'm always going to remember because my brain was like, yeah, it's creamy. I was like trying to wrap my head around like, oh my God, it's heavier. And when I heard freaking Plague changed my entire trajectory and life. That album was just like super sick. And then I went into deathcore, and when I heard that, like the Chelsea Green EP changed my entire life to another step. But in Christcore, I feel like for a lot of people, it was the entry in that world, like the Divorce Preda, and like I would say I would classify Underoath in that as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
Old Underoath.
Because old Underoath was heavier than what people remember.
Yeah.
Like old Underoath was fairly heavy. Like we're talking Norma Jean and all those, you know what I mean? Like
not many people remember when they wrote Active Depression. Not many people remember that.
Those riffs, they legit wrote slam parts. Like they had like it was very heavy and different. That's personally my favorite Underoath, even if I was full on Reinventing Your Exit and like, you know what I mean? I was an emo kid, so obviously I love all that stuff. But
oh
dude.
Album of the Eon.
Dude, it was, but yeah, so christcore played, I feel like, a big, even later on, I mean, when we had like more goofy bands like Attack and stuff like that, like it was always, because I know they changed. At first it was kind of a Christian band and like things changed or whatever, but like that era of just like christcore was the introduction for so many people. I don't feel like we would have the same scene today without it. Seriously, like that's how big.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it. John, how do you feel about that?
Well, do we? No, I'm just curious. Like, do we feel like? Because I feel like there was an era where we would talk about christcore and Christian deathcore and Christian metalcore. Like those were terms that were thrown around a lot to kind of like separated them from like the rest of deathcore and the rest of metalcore, right? And I don't feel like we see as much of that today. But I don't think that's necessarily because there's like less Christians in metal, right? Like I don't think that's necessarily the case. What do you guys think kind of changes there? Like is it just people don't want to use it as a label, like it doesn't need to be separate, or like do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I think that can hold some value to it.
Yeah, I think people don't want to do the label thing. It's like saying someone's a Christian rapper. You know what I mean? It's like you're cutting yourself off to
accessibility
to a certain audience group. It's like because the second someone hears Christian deathcore, Christian this, they're automatically not going to listen to it because of like religious trauma or just whatever they're going through in their life with Christ. But like Josh and I, for example, like I'm a hardcore Christian, but we play in a secular band. That doesn't define me.
Yeah.
It doesn't define my faith, but I'm also not going to sit there and be like, repent and turn to Christ.
Yeah, it's another level of things. I don't know what you guys think, but I think also what contributed to less and less people saying it is tons of band did it, but it wasn't true. Like, and it was revealed later on.
They would like, and then just kind of sell out. And because I feel like Christian core, like christcore bands got popular really fast because people really wanted to see Christian metal. Yeah. And then they did it for that clout. And then they're like, haha, just kidding. Like, fuck you guys.
It's kind of crazy too, how it really was kind of like a ticket to some sort of fame or some sort of fan base by simply being, right? Like just by kind of existing, it's kind of crazy that on one side it's like, it's because those bands resonated with people. Like there's value in that. It's not for nothing. It's just, I don't know. I just think it's interesting to see how kind of like the times have changed with that sort of stuff, because it was such a big part of the culture back then. And always had, I think specifically when you talk about metalcore and then even more so deathcore, right? Like there was always something, I guess, kind of like off-putting or weird about like, a lot of deathcore bands inherently were like anti-God. Like that was a part of a lot of the imagery. So I also think, that's maybe, that part hasn't really gone away, right? And I think maybe defining your band as a Christian deathcore band would kind of like make it easier for people to understand, like, hey, we're not talking about that sort of stuff, right? But you've heard all the stories of bands not getting along because of they play the same style of music, but because of their beliefs and stuff like that. And it's, I don't know, it's I don't think it's as much like that anymore. I think for the better, but it's interesting to look back on, because it was such a big focus back then.
But I feel like it was cool also on the other side, like personally, as someone who never, like, I never resonated. Like, we have these conversations on the podcast because, like, I personally believe in God and stuff like that. I won't say I'm Christian because I'm more of the spiritual person who can talk for an hour about we chose this life as a soul. And like, I'm this annoying person who's just like, who loves talking about that stuff. And like, to me, it's like, it's a big GTA game life kind of thing. But at the same time, I never wanted to have like, devil, Satan stuff on me and stuff like that. I'm just like, to me, it was always on the side of like, you're angry and you're putting it on God. You're mad, you're upset in your life, and you put it on like, I'm mad at God. Like, that's how I always saw it. No disrespect to people. That's how I always saw it. You're upset, you put it on God, you're mad.
Yeah.
Because of things that happen, but the side that I thought was always cool was some bands like For Today who kind of use the power of God thing, like not being afraid and kind of fighting back. I feel like that worked better in metal, you know what I mean? As opposed to do like a chorus who's like, geez, you know what I mean? Like it's more the anger of God feels better to me, made more sense in metal than just like, you know what I mean? Like
other styles of music. Yeah.
I think even go ahead.
Like brutal, man. Like the war and the wrath of God is no joke. And like biblically, it's like it's metal.
Yeah. A lot of the Bible is metal as fuck. Let's be real.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Seriously. So it's like, I feel like for a lot of people, it was like christcore basically welcomed a lot of people who maybe would have never been attracted to metal otherwise. I feel like that's what happened because so many people were just like, and sometimes it's, you're young, your parents are just like, you know what I mean? Like there was so many stuff like that. I had a friend his parents were like super, going to church, stuff like that. They would only be allowed to, you know what I mean? Like Christian bands only. So they were spread out, stuff like it was real. So for him, it was cool for us as well, right? Because he could come to the shows seeing those bands. So it was welcoming people that otherwise maybe, would have never been part of it. So it was cool to see. Like, I feel like that definitely contributed to more people being open-minded about it.
So, I agree.
That's how I see it.
It was up until I discovered Oceano when I was like big on christcore only that I was like, okay, maybe these other bands
too heavy. This is too heavy to not listen to.
yeah, dude. It all rules.
Well, you were talking earlier about vibe, right? Like we were talking about taking it as a vibe. I feel like that's the same thing, right? Because I think you guys can relate with me on that. You can also appreciate a band that maybe you would never write those lyrics or it's not like resonating, but for what it is, for the band, for like the vibe, the music, you can also just take it as a at least I'm talking for myself, but for me, that's kind of what I do. You know what I mean? Like
take it for its artistic value.
Yes. Like watching an horror movie type thing, right? Yeah. It's when you watch an horror movie, well, hopefully you don't want to do what you see in the movies, but it's kind of the same thing, right? You can listen to songs, stuff like that. When I was younger, I had maybe a little harder time to do that, but now that's kind of what I do. So I guess it's kind of the same thing for you guys. You were talking about Oceano, so that's kind of what you did, just like taking the music for what it is, I guess.
Well, yeah. There's a point where I kind of stop and I'm like, all right, I can't listen to this just because sometimes it'll just be like too much. Like the bands are all like, "Hail Satan, Lucifer."
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, okay, like I get it, more power to you. But there's a certain point where I'm just like, all right, I'm not going to listen to it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I like most stuff.
Okay. Yeah. It's kind of
there's a lot of music that, you talk about vibe, but there is something to be said about like resonating with what you're listening to also. Right. Like, I mean, I'm personally not of any like religious belief, but there's outside of that topics and things that I don't care to listen to because of the content of the lyrics, right? Like it doesn't even have to do necessarily with religion. It's just, I think people resonate with different things and don't resonate with certain other things. And that's just how we consume music. Right. But, Yeah, that's super interesting to hear. I love talking about this sort of stuff because I feel like, again, right, like it was such a big focus back in the day, but I don't feel like this sort of stuff is talked about as much anymore. Especially, and I mean, this is no dig on anyone doing it, but outside of the traditional like religious spaces, like I feel like we have the same thing in podcasts. Even there's like, you know, religious specific podcasts and these things and these topics what might be discussed there, but not so much outside of that. So I feel like it's important to have these discussions just because it's just different perspectives. I don't know. I think it's super interesting to hear about again, especially because it was such a big part of our scene, you know? So thank you guys for sharing. It's super cool.
It's great to have a scene where all walks of life, all different like faiths and all that still come together for deathcore. Whether it be a Christian deathcore band or not, there's still that intermingling of believers who still listen to Suicide Silence that they love unanswered for some odd reason. Like myself, that song bangs. I don't care about the lyrics. Like the intermingling of all that business just for the sake of music. It's what makes music so powerful.